Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida. Dude, I'm telling you, dude. Dr. Narco Longo came on and dropped the hammer of the god.
America's mother, daughter of Atlantis. God sent the Weatherland. The devil sent the Spanish. Florida is Eden, the fountain of youth, Kalia's deception. So Florida is the truth.
Welcome to Florida, baby.
Dr. Narco Longo.
Florida, it is everything. There's too much truth bomb being dropped. I can't digest it all.
Old World, Florida.
Please welcome Dr. Narco Longo.
What's up, y'all? How's it going? So, guys, we've got some special guests tonight. Can you hear me? You hear Topher? Shane, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Whoops. Topher can't hear us. I think that's on your end. You're muted, Topher, it looks like. There we go.
Very good.
Okay, sweet. So we've got my brother, Professor Longo, right? And familiar face to most of you guys, I hope. Professor Longo himself. And then we've got Topher, Christopher Gardner from the Biocharisma channel. And yeah, we're going to get talking. Toph told me that he wanted to meet my brother. So I thought it was a great opportunity to just kind of stream, you know, let the people see it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Awesome.
yeah, we're going to get into it. They color coordinated unintentionally, the same hue.
Definitely.
And so, yeah, we're going to talk about Viktor Schauburger, I guess. Maybe not at all. Who knows? But I think that's kind of the biggest common ground that these two have, or at least, you know, would like to get into.
Yeah.
And I'll just real quick, Topher's from Florida, for those who don't remember or who aren't familiar. And yeah, I'll let Topher introduce himself a little bit more.
What up, family? The Longito family. Yeah, man, Professor Longo, I've really appreciated hearing you on the one-on-one podcast, and another Florida stud, just crushing. The everything that you were bringing up about like the Rosicrucians and Steiner, like as soon as you started talking about that in the last podcast you did with him, I was just like, I have to talk to you. So that's why I started bugging your brother. You know, I was like, get me the inroads with the prof. And I'm a Florida cat from back in the day. I lived in Florida till I was 18, but that was a long time ago, 1993. So, but I've gone back. My family still has, I still have property in Florida. My mother still lives in Florida. I go back every once in a while. It's a beautiful state. And I really appreciate you being the director of tourism and social services for all of the state, Dr. Longo. Like you've really brought in lots of tax revenue to DeSantis. He's very appreciative of that.
Yeah.
And all my friends in Central Florida are having a hard time finding a property that's inexpensive now, but that just goes with the territory, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Garden of Eden's got a little housing bubble going on.
Big one.
But I'm in between places right now too, looking for a place. It's hard. Hit me up, anyone out there if they've got any leads.
Are you in Delray? Because your store's in Delray, right?
We're in Lake Worth.
Lake Worth. Yeah,
Okay.
I always liked Lake Worth. I lived south of Lake Worth and then north of Lake Worth. Last place I lived in Florida was Boynton Beach, so I was just north of you guys in Lake Worth. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's new for you? Tell the people like what you do and stuff.
Oh, I'm a dome builder and I'm also a massage therapist. So I know that's a weird combination. I look at myself as being a sculptor. I use my hands. The domes I build out of ferro cement. So the houses are what I call living artwork. And then I also use my hands in massaging people. So I have a couple construction companies, and then I'm also a podcaster. I really love talking with cats like you guys and just learning. Like my whole life is about learning, and when we get into Schauburger, try to do my best at mimicking nature and just honoring God's creation through beauty. So that's what I've been up to.
Mm-hmm. So growing up in Florida, I got to ask, it wasn't far from where you were, just a little further south. What do you think of this whole Miami Nephilim giant alien psyop?
Well, I heard One-on-One's take, and I think that morning I was calling you at the same time because I was listening to him and the prof also, and I was like, I don't have a TV, so I know nothing. And then a couple of my Christian friends that live in Florida, they were like, "Oh, it's the Nephilim," and then you were the sober one. You were like, "Dude, this is just BS. There's nothing going on." So as soon as you said that, I didn't pay any more attention to it. I haven't paid it any mind at all.
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah, you grew up in Tequesta territory too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You saw some of the mounds growing up?
Yeah, because I was always out in like West Broward. So like I was like where I played soccer and most of my sports were everywhere from like Weston up through Margate and then Coral Springs. And there was like, in fact, my last like huge paper I had to do in high school, we did it on how Weston was Arvida Corporation at the time, had like bought all this Indian territory of the Everglades and essentially just paved it over. And like as a 17-year-old liberal, young man, I was like, mortified with how a corporation could do that. But we spent a lot of times down in Coral Gables, which by the way, I've been locked into all your work with the Miami, because Coral Gables, that whole area, that's a portal like that. I even felt that as like an unconscious super athlete. I would go down there and I would just be like, whoa, like there was just juice down there. So yeah, that was like those were my stomping grounds growing up. I was all through there.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to get your take on something that I've been researching pretty recently. This is the Miami Circle, Tequesta, or their ancestors, who knows. But up the Tequesta ranged down from the Keys all the way up to pretty much Palm Beach, Jupiter, and Tequesta, the city Tequesta, which is north of there. So I found something out a couple days ago. Everyone here is going to get a sneak peek to. not released yet, never presented in video format before. And this is a good opportunity. Speaking of shapes and domes, I want to know what you think about this, Topher. Is deformed crania in Palm Beach County. So a lot of people think of elongated skulls, or they hear elongated skulls, they hear deformed crania, they hear Star Child skull, and they think of Peru. Well, guys, deformed crania were prevalent in ancient Florida as well. And in fact, the head of anthropology for the whole state back in like 1920 said the majority of skeletal remains from Florida have cranial molding, right? Okay, so blah, blah, blah. I'm going to be focusing on this in a very, I'll expound on it in a video that's coming up, but I can't help but show this stuff. Like I can never, sit on something until I'm ready to present it. I always have to just throw it out there.
Spill the beans. Awesome.
So this is Boynton Beach, Florida. For those who don't know, Boynton Beach is very, very close to where we are right now. We're in Palm Beach County. Boynton Beach is in Palm Beach County. It's just south of Lake Worth, where we are, or at least I am right now. And if you went through Boynton Beach, you wouldn't think that it had anything special to offer like this, because they don't put this in the history books. Trust me, growing up in Florida, they didn't show us deformed crania, in our own neighborhood. So this one is special. There's elongated skulls all over Florida, all over, like long, the cone heads, more Peru type, Paracas type skulls. But what we have here is what some people would call a bilobed or trilobed, essentially like a Star Child skull, if anyone knows Lloyd Pye. Let's just look at this. So Exhibit F particularly, you can see the lobes. Well, D doesn't have as much of a valley going down through it, like separating the two sides of the brain. But look at this shit.
It's bizarre, yeah.
That's wild.
Who would have thought that they're shaping skulls like that in Florida, or that they're being born like that? You know that some elongated skulls don't have a sagittal suture?
I did not know that.
Yeah, pretty crazy, which means they're almost something other than human. And reshaped, deformed crania, like elongated, have been found in utero. So someone died with a long head, and their child had a long head before they were even born. So
what's your theory on that? Do you think that was like one of the Nephilim like strains? Like what's your take on that?
It's potential. I think, okay, so across the board, the jaws on these things are massive. You know that Florida skulls, the skulls in Florida are on average twice as thick as the average skull, like the walls of the skull. Twice as thick on average. So we're not even discussing giants or anything like that. They'll tell you that themselves, the Smithsonian. So what do I think about it? Deformed crania are always associated with the upper class, the elite. That's what we're told. The religious class, the warrior class, the elite, the royalty. So in Florida, it's well known that amongst all the tribes, there was a royal class, a royal race, and then kind of like a peasant class. One of the ways that you could ascend into the royal class was by sacrificing the firstborn child to the chief. That would elevate you in a lot of these tribes. But Why would they do this? If someone were asking me why do they do this, your crown chakra is up there, manipulating the crown chakra. Sometimes they would trepan the skull, where they'd cut a hole out and just a lot of times leave it, and it would heal over. The skin would heal over, but they'd just have a hole in the brain. I think Ignatius Donnelly said that Atlanteans are responsible, or that the Atlantis race, might have been Blavatsky, said the Atlanteans have a hole at the top of their head, or maybe the Lemurians. I'm a little fuzzy on that, but one of these ancient empires, the people always had a hole at the top of their head. So, try slapping a yarmulke on these things. You need two, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it messes with the Saturnian crown chakra up at the top. But, two domes.
Yeah.
What does it do?
That
real
would
quick,
increase. Go ahead.
just real quick, last thing I want to mention is that we're told that it usually did not make them smarter. So a lot of people think like more space, more brain. This is a way you can tell the fake ones from the real ones too. The fake ones usually maintain the same cranial capacity, no matter how you shape it. So like the binded skulls that were emulating a natural skull would have maintained a low cranial capacity, or average. The real, Nephilim, Star Child, whatever you want to call it, the real big-headed things born naturally with the big heads, their cranial capacity is larger. So the bigger the skull, the bigger the cranial capacity.
Right.
So could have been smarter,
Well, that changes to me the antenna, right? So we know that the gray matter of the brain isn't where we're holding all the information. And that the skull shape, especially how our temporal mandibular nerve is relative to our jaw and our head, this is all an antenna. So when you have a double dome like that, you'd have more surface area. So it might not be like, say, a smarter being, but it probably was a more intuitive being. And you talk a lot about the Takestas. They were like extremely good hunters, right? Because they were so physically capable.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine what they did was they just probably figured out a system in which that they could get more instinctual, like on the animal level, to be better hunters. Like to get to that point, because if they have like thicker bone, that means that they were probably eating better, right? They would probably have like a nutritional, like really high nutritional value. That would be my guess, that there was some link to that, because there's certain animals like they have a really small brain, but this thick skull. It's just like, why was nature making that animal that has such a small little brain, like with so much of this bone matter around it? Like, what was the function of that?
Shane, or to Professor Longo, excuse me. What do you think?
It's extremely bizarre, and I do think it's probably something close to what Topher's getting at, some sort of magnetic field sort of operation going on. It probably has very little to do with actual like material brain or the material skull. It's something to do with it as a receiver, or it as some kind of field operator, something along those lines. I think that what you said about in utero children, sort of getting it epigenetically, from someone who had it done manually, and now that all of a sudden the child has it done not manually. I think that probably lends some credence to that theory, that it's some sort of morphic resonance or some kind of field thing going on with that.
Yeah, can I show you another one? It's harder to tell. This is enlarged towards the back, but it's a whole skeleton from the Nebbit site. Guys, guess where this one was from? Right down the road from Mar-a-Lago. Palm Beach Island, this one is. And these were large people pulled out. It's hard to tell, but the skull goes far in the back.
Mhm.
And like most of the skeletons they find in a lot of these mound complexes have some type of, reshaping of the skull, or they're naturally shaped differently. I want to show you guys else something to the point about being born with it or not being shaped. There's also people who are naturally long-headed, certain races, and one of those is still in the Caribbean. I'm gonna have to pull it up here, but here we go. This is someone who is born with an elongated skull in the Caribbean. On the island of Dominica. So not the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
Dominica.
Look at that skull.
Pretty crazy, right?
That is crazy.
So that's natural, according to the information in the picture. And that's not typically what you see from skull flattening. Usually it goes up more. Yeah, the Huns, so it's not just a black thing. The Huns did it intentionally, we're told, but they might have been natural too. All over Europe, all over Asia, all over Africa, all over North and South America. But I bet most of you didn't know they were doing it in South Florida a lot, and all over Florida.
Never heard that before. Like,
No, this is the first time.
Yeah, they push the Peru skulls so hard, and they are bizarre. But from all records out there, apparently the Tula people of like Oklahoma or Arkansas down into like Texas a little bit, maybe Georgia, I forget. They were close to the Caddo people, which is Texas. The Tula, I kid you not, were said to have 3-foot long heads.
Wow.
3 feet long.
They're still living in the Stone Age.
And guess what? They brought Peruvians with them on that expedition. So they wouldn't have been pulling any tall tales about. That's an Inca chronicler telling us that. And they had elongated skulls in Peru. So they were saying, holy shit, the Caddo or the Tula people had the longer skulls than even the Peruvians had ever heard of. So that's in like Texas area, the DeSoto expedition. But all right, enough head. So let's just get into it. Oh, here. What do you see?
Oh my god.
Look at that thing.
Yeah.
The big lima bean.
So I'm going to be doing a whole video on elongated skulls coming up. Guys, stay tuned. Let me know if y'all are interested in that. But all right. Let's talk Schauburger.
Woohoo!
All right. I guess I'll go first.
Oh.
I was introduced to Viktor Schauburger through the guy that we bought the bookstore from. And so he ran a metaphysical bookstore for 5 decades, 50 years. So he knows a thing or two. And he's into a lot of stranger things, like Steiner, like Schauburger, things that are kind of not easy for like a super like, I don't know, logical brain, like people who I don't know, who need like perfect explanations for everything, that they can't really think creatively. They struggle with people a lot. And he's really out there. And so he introduced me to Steiner. He introduced me to Schauburger, a bunch of people like that. And he kept telling me about Schauburger. He said, "Oh, you have to read Living Water by Viktor You have to read it. And I said, okay. And it's out of print, I believe. And I said, okay, like I'll read it. And I didn't read it. I just put it off. And then this is funny. I read a few things here and there, like a little intro. And then I heard you talking, Topher. This is maybe like a year ago I don't know if it was with Dr. Longo or with somebody else. I can't remember, but you were talking about Schauburger a lot. And I think whoever you were talking to wasn't that familiar with him. And then I was like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. And I went back, and that kind of ignited me to go back and learn more. And then I ended up talking to the guy we bought the bookstore about Schauburger a lot. And he's just like a wealth of information. I mean, he's read all the biographies, all the books many times over, and just super interesting to talk to. And all the theories, they're so stimulating. There's so much juice there that it's kind of like Steiner, where everything they say might not be correct. A lot of what they say is correct, but there's some stuff where I'm like, okay, maybe that's a little out there. More Steiner than Schauburger for sure. But everything that they're saying is at least unique. I've never heard someone say it before. They're both so creative in their thinking that they stimulate your brain. So like when you're reading them, it's like hard to put the book down. It's almost like a page turning novel, but it's not a novel at all. It's like, this is nonfiction, but it's that stimulating that I'm like, oh my God, like I've never thought about this before. That's been my experience with him. And then watching some videos. But I think that there's a real lack of information on YouTube, especially on Schauburger, especially like really knowledgeable, people who really know what they're doing. I think it's a hole that needs to be filled.
Yeah, he's intentionally been written out, or I shouldn't say written out, just intentionally not spoken about, just because, especially his turboprop, like the engines that fly us all around the world with no fuel, they were stolen from him. Right. And so they don't want people to know about him, because you look at some of these drawings that he was doing in the 30s, and it was like, oh, that's a turboprop. That's exactly how Boeing and Lockheed Martin and all these massive airplane companies that claim that they're using millions of gallons of fuel every day, they're not. They're not at all. That's total bullshit. They're using a little bit of fuel to start an air compressor, and they're using Viktor Schauburger, like that design right there. Yeah. That's it. If you put that on a horizontal axis and then you layer it, that's a turboprop.
Right. Interesting. By the way, you pulled up his Wikipedia. Schauburger is the same zodiac sign as Nikola Tesla. They're both Cancers, which is interesting.
And the thing with all those like guys that were in that cut of like knowing that we live in a fluid, they both were about the ether. And the ether is a fluid. It's just a very, very subtle fluid. And pretty much all the ether physicists that were worth their salt were all just disregarded, and they brought Einstein on the scene to kind of usher in the idiocracy. But the Schauburger was totally game to manipulate the ether through oscillation. He called it rhythmic oscillation. Right. And that rhythmic oscillation would give you an over unity effect. And he would show that he was the first person to actually describe what I think it's not only what a standing columnar wave was, but also what a longitudinal wave was. And he showed it in rivers. Yeah. Because what he would show is in a river, if you put in like a little dam, how both upstream and downstream the river would change its shape because the flow of the water was different. Right. Now you talk to anybody in the world, from a Western mindset, they say, oh, there's no way that could change anything upstream.
Right.
You know, if it's upstream, how is the change of the flow downstream going to affect it? And he was like, no, there's a longitudinal wave that goes the entire from the spring head all the way to where the river enters the ocean. And people thought he was nuts, and he proved it by making these log flumes
Yes.
that could carry
All those. Yeah.
crazy amount of weight.
Yeah.
And so he was able to make these engines or these motors that what they would do is they would spin and they would have the rhythmic oscillation, just like certain fish or birds. And what that would do is that would create a vacuum in front of the being, as it would create a propulsion behind it. So it was being sucked and pushed at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. It's
And
fascinating. Watching the videos, these are log is like a euphemism. These are full blown like massive trees.
yes,
That they're these aren't 2x4. If you watch the video, there's one on YouTube. It's like a documentary on him, and it has a lot of the black and white footage. And these are trees just getting like shot downstream, like nothing, and barely displacing the water on either side of it.
yeah.
Which is something that Schauburger was big on, like this sort of things spiraling inwards instead of spiraling outwards.
The
Implosion.
the centripetal. Yeah, he wanted centripetal spin, not centrifugal.
Right. And so you see, like when he was, a lot of his ideas have been used to design rivers and things like that. And they can generate a ton of force down the center and not be messing up the riverbanks at all. And so you can actually have more water, more force with no flooding or no erosion on the banks. I mean, this stuff is like top, like Topher said. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that people do not want the populace to be knowledgeable about. I mean, without a doubt, it's this is where it's at. Sorry about my dog barking.
Yeah, and he didn't make friends. Like he was hyper critical of the governments that were trying to utilize his information. He was hypercritical of other inventors because he wasn't formally educated. He came from a family of foresters.
Right.
So his whole thing was to observe nature and then mimic it.
Right.
And he had like Tesla, both of them, and this might be the Cancerian energy that you're talking about. They could both displace their consciousness and put it in something remote to their body. And then they could remote view what that was that they were trying to observe.
Right.
And he did that with water. And he did that with actually seeing like what is water, because he was very adamant that we were grossly underestimating how magic of a substance water is.
Yeah.
And he was like, for as magical as water is, ether is that, but it's on a higher octave. It was just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, he had some a few interesting things that I was looking at. One is he was obsessed with, just like it's very mystical, his thinking. Like Topher said, it's very Cancerian. He would be able to look at like one drop of water on a window and just sort of meditate on that. Whether that's literally, like Topher said, is he literally staring at it, or is it sort of just in his mind's eye? It doesn't really matter. And extrapolate all these creative ideas just from how that water droplet falls. Why doesn't it fall in a straight line? Why does it form sort of a bubble or around it on the edges? The idea of surface tension on water is not that old of an idea. I mean, in terms of like mainstream science, I don't have dates on that, but if you look it up, it's not that old. And that's the sort of thing that Schauburger was on the front lines of. And still a lot of what he's talked about, or most of what he's talked about, is not put into practice or thoroughly known, at least not by the mainstream. Like Topher said, it's probably being used at the governmental level or at the level of huge corporations like that, because it's too valuable, really.
It's literally like both Tesla and him had to be defamed because all of the power in the world is Tesla's, like all the electricity, I should say, and all the pneumatics that we quote unquote fly with jet fuel, that's all Schauburger.
So here, Topher, I wanted to just break that down real quick. For those who aren't in on this kind of conspiracy theory, I remember finding that out like 5 years ago, and pretty much blew my mind. No one was receptive to it back then.
Mm-hmm.
Just to summarize, back to what he was saying about airplanes and this kind of implosion model, the jet engine being almost self-sufficient once you get it started. So, that they tell us that they store thousands of pounds of fuel in each of these wings.
Tens of thousands, not
Right.
just thousands of pounds, tens of thousands.
Right. And you've seen the idiots, slapping it on, like throwing the suitcases, the suitcases are like falling apart and all this stuff. And then you see people climb on the wings and it's like, it's like, it looks like it weighs 10 pounds, the whole wing. It's so light. And you see just the plane shaking. It doesn't look like it's bolted together all that tight. Like the wings have flex to them,
They have to have flex, yes.
And that's not what you'd expect from a piece of metal stuffed full of tens of thousands of pounds. I don't have the numbers on that, but airplanes don't behave like they're filled full of gas. And I think that we are being misled as to how much gas is going in. They fill that thing up in 5 minutes before you take off.
That observation is all you really need to know. Like you go to fill up your car full of 20 gallons of gas and it takes 5 minutes. Let's say their pumps are 100 times stronger than that. You'll see them like when it taxis in and they'll fill that whole thing up in 10 minutes. So at the most, they could fill that thing with maybe 1,000 gallons of fuel in the time that they actually, you see them, fueling that. And there's no place for that fuel. I'm always on the exit seats over the wings because I grew up with pilots. My family's full of pilots. They're always like the safest part of the plane. Exit seats over the wings. So that's where I always get my seats. Mm-hmm. I'm watching the hydraulics. I'm into the flat earth stuff, so I'm always using the tip point of the wing as one of my points of view relative to the horizon. And I'm watching the hydraulics on both the bottom part of the wing and the upper part of the wing. And you see when the wing opens up, there's a gap between the flap and where the resting spot is. If that's both top and the bottom is convex because of Bernoulli's principle, it's not like that thing is solid all the way out. Fuck off. There's not all that fuel in there. That's not true.
Yeah. It's a tax write-off.
It's a complete tax write-off.
We spent it all on the fuel. There's $100 million in fuel. I don't know.
Yeah, and how is it every time there's a financial crash? These, like the airlines work on smaller margins than restaurants do.
Yeah.
There's a financial crash all the restaurants go out of business. But yet these airlines who have 100,000 employees just get more and more and more, tax, or not tax, but what is it called? Money infusion. Dude, there's some shenanigans going on, something huge. And now that we know, like you can literally, I had Dr. Andy Kaufman on, and there's in the state of California and Oregon, there are now lawsuits against a bunch of these airline companies because they're actually advertising that they'll spray whatever you want them to spray when they're flying.
They got plenty of weight to fill. You know, those things. They've got plenty of capacity to fill.
And when you see like these dispersant cans that they'll add and put in, they're not more than like, it looks like you're going diving. Those diving tanks, they're not much bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, what's that?
No, I was gonna guess. What do they say is usually in it? Like boron?
No, you can hire them to do whatever effect you want. There's something like 180 companies in the United States alone that have privatized local weather engineering. So you can just do like in your state. You're like, okay, I want my wedding to be perfectly sunny or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You put that in there, and they're like, somebody's willing to take your money to try and make that happen. And it's the same thing like for skiing and raining. Like they've been doing this forever of like, oh, like this area is dry. Let's like, create a false front and like dump some water there. It's like, it's as old as time.
Right.
Aluminum, barium, strontium.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the chemtrail ingredients. But real quick, since we've got this queued, we can come back to the jetspiracy. But here we go. No sound on this one, and just real quick, can you pause that, Jimmy? Just keep it paused. We're reacting to this, guys. Reaction time. Okay, YouTube, we're reacting. So, oh my god. Click
This is a
here.
great documentary, by the way. Anyone who needs like an introduction or's never heard of Viktor Schauburger, this little documentary is on YouTube, and it's very good.
Mm-hmm. So, guys, reaction mode. Let's get it.
That's incredible. Woo! Ah. And laminar flow means the prof brought up earlier, is when you put something big on something that has laminar flow, it almost becomes super buoyant. There's no resistance when it moves. And we see this with hurricanes. We see this with tornadoes. Whenever you have a super low pressure zone, and then you get the fluid, in this case, water, vortexing inward, whatever is in the center almost has like, this is on a horizontal plane, but that energy as it's moving like that can take anything and essentially make it weightless.
Right.
Like there's no resistance in it.
Is there any other cool parts to that video, Professor?
Yeah, there's a lot, but I don't have them like timestamps or anything. I would just recommend to people to go check it out. Obviously, read the books on Schauburger and read the things he wrote, but that's a good intro. But what Topher said is really interesting. So Schauburger was obsessed with, or one of the first people to really keen in on the fact that within a small area, there can be temperature differences.
Yes.
So, like you could take 1 foot by 1 foot, and people might just think, oh, well, this 1 foot by 1 foot square of water. Well, first of all, it's moving, so it's not a static thing, but we usually treat it as some sort of, static material, is all just a uniform temperature. And that's not true.
No.
If you measure this part, it's different, slightly different, but those tiny differences in temperature are what are causing a lot of that movement. Just like in weather, when you see a high pressure and low pressure system, storms are moving in and out and the air is being thrown around. It's a similar thing, just on a different scale. Like Topher said, the ether and water are not all that different. And so he was one of the first people to do that, and really expound upon it and be able to control it. He's like, look, if we can understand these temperature differences and the way that water moves, and when it's done properly, and we can sort of mimic nature in that, we can use that to our advantage, and we can set it up so we know where the temperatures are different and move it, for free. Just like, weather's the easy way, because we all understand, we all nod our head when someone says high pressure, low pressure, and storm moves in to fill the low pressure or something. But then when you start talking about water, people are like, "What?" But it's the same. It's the exact same thing.
That's another reason why he's been hidden from the mainstream, is because of all the weather manipulation. He was huge in saying, like, if you create a low pressure zone anywhere, nature will immediately create a high pressure zone right next to it, because nature's in balance.
Right.
And vice versa. If you create a high pressure zone somewhere, a low pressure zone will occur immediately around it, because he called nature is always seeking a dynamic disequilibrium. And that's connected to a hemisphere. And so you have the hemisphere is the female potential, because he was a hermeticist. Like, reading his articles,
Yeah.
he was like straight from Thoth. He might have been like a reincarnation of Thoth.
Yeah.
Like, so he was like, okay, the female is the hemisphere, it's like a boob, and then the male is the phallus. It's the half of the vesica Pisces. The full vesica Pisces is the yoni, right? You half it, then you have the male, the more conical aspect. So you combine these two, you have the male and female together. That's where you have child. That's where the energy is always moving. The temperature differential is always moving in this dynamic disequilibrium. And he would make these, and I've made them myself, these vessels that were egg shaped. And he would show, even with it being empty, you could put it out in your field and you would end up getting like 3x the gain of fertility and production from your fields.
Hey,
Wow.
can I ask you something? Would pineapples and pine cones be included in this? Because I know people always talk about pineal gland, but what you're saying reminds me of like abundance and like feng shui. People might not be privy to like the physics or whatever behind it, magnetism, but you see a lot of this is intuitive. People putting pine apples. The pineapple is just a spiny egg with a hairdo on it, and you'll see in Florida that's like the universal symbol of abundance, and it is the swingers symbol. That's the upside down pineapple. What pineapple upside down cake? Okay, but the pineapple is like the Floridian egg, because you'll always see this in between rich neighborhoods or rich pieces of property where they'll have a pineapple or a pine cone up on kind of almost like an altar in the corners of walls, out front of gardens. You always see this pineapple, and around Florida, it's a symbol of abundance. And people believe you have a pineapple on the home, you earn more money, your crops would do better, etc. It's like this. So is there something to that? You're saying just the shape, like having an egg in it, or does it need to have like that, the mechanics behind it, or whatever the contraption is?
Well, you're going to trip, because the pine cone itself encodes both the phi ratio, golden ratio, and it also encodes, I believe it's pi 3.1415. I think all three of those are in a pine cone, because the ratio of ascending spirals to descending spirals. And with an organic pineapple, because it's very important to know, like the non-organic pineapples, the ones that have been bred by Dole and all the rest of it, those aren't proportional. Those are bred to be bigger, fatter, and grown in really bad soil. But like the normal shaped pine cones themselves, I think it has to do with how water hits them from the top, because I used to grow pineapples in Costa Rica. When you watch when the rain hits them and the way the water spirals when it's hitting all their like pointy leaves on the top, it does some crazy water structuring, dude. Like, it's really cool. So it could be a nod to the shape. It could be a nod to structuring water. It's just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the, I was going to say that when he was talking about structure, so Schauburger had the structure of water, or the flow of water, as a double helix, like Topher said earlier. It can go upstream and downstream. Sorry, my dog's barking. And he had that sort of structure flow of water as a double helix. And DNA was not discovered to be shaped as a double helix until the 1950s. And so he predates that, several decades. So he definitely was hitting the nail on the head with all kinds of stuff. Especially water was, where, Topher said, he was a forester, and he realized how important water was. And then he did move into sort of air or ether based technologies, because he realized, well, if this works in water, we can apply that to the air, and you change a few variables, and you're right there. And so if you can send a log flying down a river, easily, can you send a plane flying down, easily too? And he was like, yeah. I mean, he sort of looked at things pretty simplistically.
Really
Yeah,
simplistically. Yeah.
really simplistically, and it's pretty inspiring actually when you study him, because like Topher said, he didn't have, he's not some PhD or some plant, and he's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily working for anybody. I mean,
he made fun of his brother. He like totally made fun of his brother when his brother went to university. He's like, oh, I'll no longer be able to play chess with you. They're gonna make you stupid. Oh, you two got that going on?
Yeah, I
A
went
little bit.
Yeah, I went to college. But I got my degree, but no, I did get a little bit of a flack for it. But that's okay. It was worth it. College was easy to me. It wasn't I don't know. It didn't take much work, so I was like, why not do it?
Mhm.
And
So-
it worked out.
So doesn't going back to the simple, easy, simple, didn't Schauburger have that famous quote saying simple is smart and complex is immature?
Yes.
Or like stifled thinking is complex,
Right.
like if you're grueling through ideas, it's like a dammed up river kind
Exactly.
of.
Yeah.
And yeah, what's the quote? Do we have it right there, Jimmy?
And this is like Topher said. He's hitting all my points before I can get to them. I can't keep up. But like Topher said, Schauburger he's a Hermeticist. He's a Platonist. He has this sort of thinking that the Germans and Austrians are privy to. Like we talked about Steiner, it's a sort of that like uber creative, like left field type thinking that it's not unnatural to them.
Mhm.
And to in going with this quote and sort of the simplicity of things, all it really is it's a dialectic, like in Greek philosophy. He's untying knots. So if something is complex, or your theory of it is complex, all that means is you haven't stripped it down to its elements, to its pure principles. There's just knots that haven't been untied, And
Mhm.
so, like in Platonic philosophy or something, if you're left with more questions, well, you just haven't, you haven't gotten to the bottom of it. You haven't untied the knots. There's still contradictions and things which have not been reconciled. And he's just taking these Hermetic, Platonic ideas and applying them to nature. Yeah, and that's why it's when you think about it like that, it's not that difficult. You look at a river and you just think about it. For a lot of people, that is difficult, to just look at trees and think, or look at the river and think. But to him, it came extremely naturally, and thank God we had him. I mean, because I don't. What do you think, Topher? What do you think about? I think the guy's name is Emoto. He's a water guy. The
Yeah.
guy that we bought the bookstore from, not a fan. I haven't read him at all, so I'd like to get your opinion. I don't know. What do you think about him?
I'm not a fan either.
Okay, that's good.
I
That's
mean-
all I need to know. If the two of you agree, then I'm good.
I mean, initially, like before I studied Schauburger and before like I really started to do my own.
Yeah. Emoto executed January 15th, 2024.
Damn.
Cast off. Shunned from society. Blacklisted. Longo
Yeah,
blacklisted.
Yeah.
there's some relevance to his work about like how quickly water will, I guess take on whatever energetic pattern it's sympathetic to. And this is when you get into sympathetic vibratory physics. But I tend to lean more on people that talk about the incommensurate geometry of hydrogen to oxygen. So water, we're told, is H2O, but we now know that it's actually much more complex than that. You're never just going to have like one H2O molecule, right? So the closer corollary to that's H3O4. But the most important thing that you have to understand about it is the way the energetic pattern between oxygen and hydrogen has what's known as an incommensurate geometry. An incommensurate geometry is the most mind-blowing hermetic principle. It's essentially a geometry that any way that you reduce it, it holds itself. So it's a hologram. And so hydrogen to oxygen has this holographic template in it. And so it makes itself an antenna. Like it's essentially just an antenna. And this is like why there's all these water structuring devices that use magnets, use vortexing, use all these principles to kind of set that geometry to structure it. What they're doing is that they're saying, okay, the water has absorbed this, the water has absorbed that. Let's get it back to its base geometry, which is perfect, this incommensurate geometry. Right. And then it won't carry the sympathetic signature that Emoto tried to like tell us all that was always happening.
You heard it here. Those slopes should have been sticking to fried rice and sushi. And leave the water to the clear thinkers.
The book Living Water by Viktor Schauburger.
It's actually by Callum Coates.
Oh, sorry, by Coates on Schauburger's water ideas is amazing. It's not a long read. Coates, I think, also has like a several part biography or something along those lines. I haven't read that one. I've seen it because the guy we bought the bookstore from has like the full set. Haven't gotten to it, but Living Water is just like mind blowing. It has all this sort of stuff Topher's talking about, and it's like just blows my mind. Water memory, all that.
Callum Coates' work on Viktor Schauburger, and then the actual Austrian to English translations of Viktor Schauburger's writing he wrote for a newspaper in Austria. That was then those writings were sold to a magazine. You can actually go online and find the direct translation. The key though is reading Callum Coates first, because Callum Coates kind of has a glossary of terms for Schauburger because he used words like qualigens. Like he was making up words because he was a free thinker. Like he was like, there's no word for what I'm trying to describe, but this is a qualigen. This is like when this is present, there's a higher quality. Because he was a qualitative thinker. He wasn't a quantum person. Right. He was a qualitative person. And that's really,
he is a sort of philosopher of nature. He's a philosopher of nature. And in philosophy, the reason that philosophy is so difficult, that people don't like reading philosophy, because it's a game of language. All philosophy is language. They're artists that are exploring realms of thinking which have not been explored or have not been put into words. And so you run into like Wittgenstein and Heidegger and Plato, and they use all these, or Nietzsche or someone, they use these words like Topher's saying with Schauburger. They have to sort of either take a word and give it a new meaning, which gets confusing. Like if Wittgenstein's saying something's a proposition, And he's using that in a completely different way from how you understand the word proposition, what that means. And it becomes very odd. Or they have to create a new word. And so Schauburger is literally a philosopher of nature, where he has to, he's looking at these things and he's like, I don't know how to put this into, pre-existing terms. I have to just to create a word or to use a word in a new way. I know the title Living Water is from the Bible. So in the Bible, I pulled up the verse. It's
Yep.
John 7:37. It says, Jesus once again speaks of living water, saying, quote, let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within them. And I believe the King James Bible has it as living water. And then in later translations,
Yep.
it's springing water, which is
Yep.
interesting. It's interesting that they changed it. But I think, yeah, it's interesting that they chose that term for the title. The Coates did.
Mm-hmm. I actually think the name of the book is Living Energies.
Let me see.
It's Living Energies, I'm pretty sure.
Can one of you guys talk about what living water is? Since we've already kind of dogged Emoto a little bit, we're with the living water. We're with the structured water. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That much is true. So living, what's your definition of living? What's Schauburger's definition of living?
Living means whatever it enters, touches, or is around, it increases the quality of it. So by living, what it was like the anointed from God. He wouldn't use the term God, but let's just use that term here. Because it was nature's perfect creation, and mainly the structure of it, where it came from, all of those things were in such perfect symmetry and alignment. This life springs forth from it. So I hate to use the word within the definition of itself. Mm-hmm. But another way that you could say it is that there is an extra, it imbues a dynamic aspect, a higher quality and a more dynamic aspect to whatever it's in.
Okay. Now, is this like a structural? Is this a wholly structural thing?
No.
Is living water observable through the microscope?
So here it's and I've been in this. It is observable, and you'll love this, Longo. It's because when it's highly structured, it has that blue glow to it. You know how you've done that thing on the springs, and like you can see that there's like it's almost an imperceptible like blueness to it.
Yes.
You can see it after like a really good thunderstorm. You can see these water bodies, they'll have an enlivened energy to them. And there's this, it's between like a navy blue and an aquamarine color. And it's almost like the light that's coming from it is glowing that. And he talked about, it was that blue, there's this beautiful blue that's there. It's and when you look at the chakra system where blue comes through, it makes complete sense. Like that's just one aspect of it. He also would say that's a mature water, because one thing that he was talking about is with all the industrialization that was occurring, the water that we were experiencing through pipes and like through all common things when water is pressurized, it becomes juvenile. And so it presents more of the Mars, more of the Aries energy, where it's very aggressive, it's oxidative, whatever it hits, it destroys. It's foolish, it's all the Aries archetypes. But you wanted a mature water. You wanted a Piscean water, a water that went all the way down to the aquifer and then made its way all the way back to the mountaintop and was coming out of a mountain spring. And he said another way that you could tell that the water was of a mature stature was not only the color that it had, but the temperature at which it came out of the ground, which he said right between 38 and 42 degrees, between the anomaly point of water and 42 degrees. That's when water has its most natural laminar flow. And when it's laminar, when you look at the work of Dr. Gerald Pollack's whole thing is that you want to get water to its EZ state, which is the exclusion zone state. All Pollack did was rebrand all the shit that Schauburger was talking about. It's just essentially laminar flow water. That's what you want. And you get laminar flow water at that temperature gradient, and it's a more mature, and because it's mature, it has all the dissolved salts in it. So like people that like drinking like distilled water, that's really good for clearing your body out.
Yeah.
But he wanted a mature water in people so that they could actually get something where it was like a homeopathic dose of it, the multi minerals.
Yes.
Yeah.
A good tall glass of spring water straight from the source is as good as a meal. You can take that to the bank. Trust me. Yeah. I find the same thing, with just my intuition, just trying out like clean water, living, distilled, you get hungrier a lot quicker. You have to pee. You have to pee a lot more. It's going right through you. The spring water, going back to those elongated skulls and thick skulls, and why did Florida have the thickest skulls in the world? So largest, that's debatable. They hauled everything off to the Smithsonian, but thickest, we know for sure, the thickest skulls in the world as of 1920, meaning they were finding them in 1920, and they were writing about it. Thickest skulls in the world, twice the average thickness in Florida. That's the regular sized people and the giants and the elongated crania. But guess why they said the bones were so thick? They were thinking, oh yeah, seafood, a lot of seafood. They don't eat any dairy. They didn't have the cow, the pig, any of that. Spanish brought those. So mineral water. They're in this newspaper article, you guys are going to see in the video, they say Florida's mineral water, being some of the richest in the world, lent itself, to skulls of that type. Giant. And going back to the living water, I wanted to read these since we brought it up. I like the Bible. We all like the Bible here. It's a lot more, not transcendental, but illuminating. It has everything in it. The living water, enemas, right? Things like that. Jesus was big on enemas. Truly. And this is why living water mattered so much. It was the treatment of kings, princes, right? To be able to cleanse your bowels with living water. And they're very keen on that in the original texts that would become the New Testament. Not the ones that Paul got his hands onto, because he was a meat market sacrificer who rewrote much of that, if you're interpreting it literally, but blah, blah, blah. So let's just read from the KJV. Guys, if you're not using the King James Version, your Bible has training wheels. And you see a lot of these people, preachers out here going 80 miles an hour on training wheels still, right? So KJV is original, right? There was one or two before in the English language. No, it didn't catch on. No one liked them. KJV set the world on fire, okay? KJV is the direct Greek philosophical thought going into the Greek translations via like these, alchemical wizards like John Dee, who actually kicked off a lot of what would go into the King James Version Bible under the direction of Queen Elizabeth. They
Francis.
were, then Francis Bacon. John Dee started it off. You had meetings of linguists, poets, and Kabbalists, Kabbalah, sacred geometrists, however you would say that. Architects. What does an architect have to do with the drafting of the King James Version Bible? Because they were all about proportion and harmonics and resonance. This chapter mirrors that one Kabbalistically. There's codes straight out of Genesis is the most encoded, but they're Kabbalistically correct in the King James Version Bible. They put so much thought into the wordage. They put so much thought into the numbers in every word. So King James Version is the one. All these other interpretive, like Americanized Bibles, garbage, complete garbage. People say, oh, the Bible's been rewritten. Not the King James. That was translated not from Greek, then into French, then into English. No, straight from the ancient Greek, straight from the original Hebrew. Okay, blah, blah, blah. So when they say living water, they mean it. They mean it a lot. And they chose these words very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
So
like I told you that it was changed after the King James Bible.
Yep.
The term living water is now translated as springing water.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Which, I mean, it sounds fine, but you lose a lot of the kind of stuff Topher was talking about, of the structure, of the life-giving properties, the cyclical nature. All of that is sort of implied and imbued in the term living. And Schauburger called water the blood of the earth.
Especially when you have Jesus saying, I am the life in the way.
Yeah.
Like, give me a fucking break. If he's saying I am the life, obviously living has that carries some fucking weight to it.
Yes. Now, just to read these, Song of Solomon, okay, chapter 4, verse 15. A fountain of gardens, a well of living waters, and streams from Lebanon. Jeremiah 2:13. For my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed them out cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. Jeremiah 17:13. O Lord, the hope of Israel, all that forsake thee shall be ashamed, and they that depart from me shall be written in the earth, because they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters. Zechariah 14:8. And it shall be in that day that living waters shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them toward the former sea, and half of them toward the hinder sea. In summer and in winter shall it be. Now, depending on your interpretation, that could be a liver cleanse. That could be a water cleanse. Half from, you drink half and the other half goes up the southern sea, we'll call it, right? Or the hinder sea, right? Your hindquarters. Okay.
Nice.
Enemas are good for you. Okay. Colonics, whatever you want to call it.
It's okay.
Professor Longo has an enema clinic down the street that he runs. So it's under the table.
He's studying to be a proctologist. He's into it.
Yes.
The hinder seas.
Sure.
The south mouth.
Another thing we still haven't touched on is that there's so much to cover. I mean, Schauburger is, sort of the best kept secret. Like, the more that everyone knows Tesla. He's so mainstream. Every kid, every 20-year-old guy wants to read Nicholas Tesla diary or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he's great. But Schauburger, is just as rich. And it seems like when you meet these people, like the guy who used to run the bookstore, who've been around the block, it's kind of one of those things, like the people who know, and they know Schauburger, and he's not that well researched in the public sphere, but there's a lot of people who are privately implementing stuff. And one of the things we didn't touch on is that he moved, sort of from field to field. no pun intended, because he ends up doing some agricultural stuff, which is really interesting. So, he has his water things, forestry, aerospace. And then when he gets into agriculture, that might interest a lot of the old world Florida listeners, who are maybe in Central Florida or into oranges and agriculture and things like that, because that's where it gets fascinating. He had alchemical ideas. He had all astrological ideas that are worked in, because like we said, he's definitely pulling on this sort of esoteric knowledge,
Definitely.
because that esoteric knowledge is from nature. It's not from some like abstract realm or something. It is actually like very exoteric. It's just only certain people are actually looking, and jotting it down. And when you get to things like plows and spades and agricultural equipment being copper instead of iron,
Hmm.
and he was huge on this. What are the implications of that? Why is that? Copper is in astrology or in alchemy is an earth metal. It's for Taurus and Venus and sort of this earthy.
It's fertile.
Right, it's fertile, literally.
It's like a green thumb is a copper thumb. It's an oxidized copper glove that a gardener would use. But
And you have
Gardner, what?
yeah, you have Schauburger saying to use a spade or a plow with copper instead of iron, because he thought that the iron was, it's a long discussion, but for many different reasons, sort of killing the soil or drawing life from it, not giving life to it, or drawing minerals from it instead of giving minerals to it. And that copper was actually imbuing it with further energy, further minerals, and it is alchemically or astrologically more aligned to agriculture. Super interesting. Iron is more like a Martian.
sterile.
Yeah,
Killing
warfare or something.
make your knife out of iron.
And they had stores in the UK and in Europe that were selling copper. Of course they still do, but they're just not as easy to find. That were, I believe, patented by Schauburger, and they were even selling them up until not too long ago.
And just so you guys know, I'm working with a bunch of people now where we're bringing back copper farming implements.
I didn't even know that, but that's awesome. Yeah, you're doing the Lord's work, literally. So what do you think about that, Topher? Obviously, I assume you are an expert.
It makes all the difference. Now the rage in agriculture, especially like small scale agriculture, is electroculture.
Right.
And electroculture is essentially you make a copper antenna. So you're imbuing, this Venusian energy into black soil, carbon, the Saturnian energy of Kronos, of structure in the ground. And you add this added electrical potential. And if you do this after you've stored your seeds in a vessel that's an egg-shaped vessel that has a southern polarity magnet, facing into it, your yields are massive. If you structure your water while you do your electroculture, you don't need to use pesticides.
Wow.
You don't need to use any type of chemical fertilizer. Like the yields that we're getting from this type of stuff is otherworldly.
Can we real quick just put a bookmark in that? Craig Lackey, thank you for the $20. Appreciate it.
I know Craig.
Is that Craig, the farmer Craig, Shane, or Pookie?
I think so. I don't know. I assume so. I think I only know one Craig, and he's a cool
guy. It could be.
Yeah.
So thank you for the $20. Good job on pimp slapping Emoto. He needed it. Amen.
That's great.
Don't worry, his grandkids are playing with Hello Kitty, so we're good.
He's Japanese. Did he even have grandkids?
Good point.
By the way, Longo, you got a Canadian girlfriend? Give me some dirt. Give me some char. What's going on?
Yeah. Canadian girlfriend.
That's hot.
Yep.
Those Canadian girls, they're freaky.
She's a can of something. I don't know. She's a yeah. We went to Canada. It was cold. It was okay. I got sick on the way down.
I bet.
Way back down.
Well, you know, South Florida is essentially just Canada South. All those Canadians, they come down and like
Yes.
pitch their tents.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they're pitching tents. They're doing a lot of skiing too down here. The French Canadians.
Dirty old man.
All right. What else? Yeah, all right. Let me read the rest of these passages. I got it. We got to at least get to the Jesus one.
You got to pull up his questions. Questions for science.
There's 100 questions for science. It's in Living Energies.
Yeah. If you
How about you read some, Shane?
Okay, I got a few here.
Pookie.
Basically, Schauburger. There's 100 questions for science, and if you read them, you'll realize you know like absolutely nothing about science, or like at least someone like me. I'm like a total lay person, and I read them and I'm like, oh man, like I have no idea. Everything's just being told to me. I have no idea what I'm doing. And he's so far ahead of his time. I mean, this is 100 years ago. Here, the first one says, "What serves the sun as a carrier of light and heat, if, in the view of our learned scientists, space is a vacuum?" So yeah, how does light and heat get here? He talks about. He says, "Why is water at the poles warmer at the bottom, like at the bottom of the ocean floor? Why is the sunlit surface so icy cold? There's ice at the top where the sun is, and it's warmer at the bottom." Very interesting. Why do the magnetic lines of force run from south to north, and why does the earth rotate from west to east? Why does the top stand upright when it is spun from the side? It goes on and on and on. I mean, basically, I can't answer a single one of them. And they're not questions for me. They're for like mainstream science and mainstream physics. And yeah, it sort of blows apart that whole worldview.
Can I give some context of why he started asking those questions to the mainstream?
Sure, yeah.
They started in his time pushing relativity. And Einstein was kicked out of the math. I forget the European Math Association. Like he was seen as a complete fraud. They knew he wasn't doing the proofs that he was presenting. So he was kicked out of Europe and then was, promoted in the United States by the small hats, right? At that same time, there was the intellectuals of the world started pushing relativity. And Schauburger was not having it. He was like, you can fuck off with your relativity. Like, this is not a real thing. And so that's why he started posing. And that's also when they really started pushing the whole notion. How did that die? My light went out. That's when they started pushing all the noise around the Earth being a globe. So a lot of these questions he's asking, he's trolling.
Right.
Like you'll love it because he was like the original troll. He was like essentially like, oh, okay, so you say we're on a globe and we're spinning. Okay, if we're spinning and somehow the heat source is out there in space, and I think at the time he was writing it, they said that the sun was like 13 million miles away or some shit. He just lambasted them with these questions. He was just trolling them.
Yeah. Some people in the chat are talking about torus fields. Do you have anything to add in there? I know that's a big topic, but not something I'm an expert on.
I feel like where shall we begin? I mean, like what is the question about the torus field? Like what?
Oh, they're just saying everything's a torus field, you know, that sort of deal. Maybe you could give a basic summary of what that even means. 'Cause I'm sure there's people who never even heard of a torus field.
Okay, so not everything's a torus field. That's too reductive.
Okay,
You
good.
could say living things emit a torus field. And so like if you were to look at a human being and you were to like center your point of attention on their heart, we know that there is a field that looks like if you were to take an apple and cut the apple from top to bottom, so you had a side cut of it, that there would be like a vortex coming in like this, like an hourglass, and then going out. It's called a paraboloid. It also looks like an hourglass. And what that is energy is centripetally coming in on one side and it's centrifugally coming out the other side. This is it, as a massage therapist in polarity therapy, this is like our main thing. So the heart is the center of that. And it's, you know, a lot of people think in Raja Yoga, it's the spiritual heart. It's like just dead center of the sternum, behind the sternum. And so this energy is what allows the Sushumna or the silver cord to attach to the heavens. So yes, there is an up and there is a down. We're not like, you know, fucking spinning on some bullshit globe somewhere. There is an up, there is a down. We have the centripetal energy, the higher order energy coming down, as Longo was pointing out earlier, like about the skulls with the hole in the head. That would have a much different energetic signature than people that have a solid head like us. We have the centripetal silver cord that comes down, and then we have the centrifugal energy that goes out and grounds out. That's why we have all of our lower order energy lower in our body, in our system, and all of the higher order energy up top.
Have you, so real quick, Topher, have you come across the plane of inertia?
Yes.
Planet Earth anagram?
Yes, I'm fully into it. I love Ken Wheeler's work. He's the one who's brought it back into the lexicon. I believe we are on the dielectric plane of inertia. And that would be the dead center of the torus field. For all of you, if you guys really want to nerd hard, check out the Primer fields from David LaPointe. They came out at the end of 2013. And he actually showed what the dielectric plane of inertia was. Like he actually showed it through magnetic resonance imaging. There it goes. So yeah, the Primer Fields 1 is like one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. This is a man that was completely bought out his technology, but I was really hoping he was going to bring it to market in a big way, but it was bought out. But he was able to show the plane of inertia through plasma that was controlled by magnetic fields that were using the shapes that Schauburger talked about. So he used these dome bell magnets, which, hey guys, there was something called a Nazi bell at one time that Schauburger helped create. But there's a way that you can control plasma, and they were essentially to be able to make a star in a jar. So all these nuclear physicists that are working on quantum bullshit, spending trillions of dollars trying to make plasma, this guy was able to do this, I think at Berkeley or Caltech or something like that, for like a few $100,000. And essentially what he was able to do was he was able to compress a plasma field and get every single light frequency that you get from the sun just using a few 100,000 volts, which is like anybody that studies physics or optics, to be able to get that full spectrum light, that's like a near impossible thing. And we've been lied to, saying that like you needed nuclear fission or nuclear fusion to do that. This guy did it with the dielectric plane of inertia.
So real quick, Andrew Ferguson, thank you for the $5. Know anything about the Earth being a reflection of our worlds, and we're in a crater with other worlds and other craters? I'll let these two guys answer for themselves, but for me, I reject all notions of like other worlds, us being secondary to something else. You can call it narcissistic or whatever, but that's my worldview, that this is the center of it all. You know, up and down are integral to like this experience, and the whole planets elsewhere. And I know you're not saying planets, but anything elsewhere to me is kind of like violating the up and the down, even if it's laterally away from us, if that makes sense. Now, I am a little bit down with, you know, throughout the ice ages, does the pole at the center, the one pole at the north, does that kind of tilt a little bit and do different sections of the same realm, same world, same crater? I don't believe in crater Earth. If you think the sun might just take wider circles, or, you know, an elliptical cycle around the North Pole, the Mount Meru, the center, that it could be thawing out different portions of land at different times, you know, kind of like the heat lamp. You know, you have a frozen lawn. If you can liken the universe to like a frozen yard, you take a heat lamp, you set it down in the middle of the yard. Okay, well then, you know, thousands of years later, the heat lamp might move an inch, and you're getting the boundaries kind of swapped out a little bit, but it's all still the same central geocentric existence. That's the way I look at it. That's the only, you know, shifting that I kind of imagine when I think of the world, is that North Pole is always that North Pole, but maybe some little areas get thawed out at different seasonal cycles. So I'm not into the whole crater thing. I think the moon reflection theory is kind of convincing, but it doesn't interest me a whole lot. So, Toph?
I really like the Prague clock as being sort of a really cool model for like, if you saw like the AWAR, his original, you know, documentary, the 5-hour, like where in the world did the flat earth go, something like that. And he said that like the reflection, the moon is like essentially a plasmatic reflection of the entire realm. And we're essentially like on, you know, a third or a fourth of it right now. And that if you look at where the Prague clock, how the Prague clock is, it's a wheel within a wheel within a wheel. And you see the zodiac, the way I like to interpret the zodiac, because each one of the signs is proportional to the amount of sunlight that's in that particular sign. And if that thing was to move, if it was to be operational, and you were to consider the full diameter of that circle to be the realm, that could be something closer to what we live in, and that could explain some of the catastrophe cycles that we happen to go through.
Let's keep it right there, Jimmy. That's a great shot of the Prague astrological clock. This is kind of just to better visualize what I was saying. If you imagine like when you throw a horseshoe and it like catches the pole and it, you know, whips around, or you kind of, you know, oh, a hula hooper is the best. A hula hooper is the best comparison. Imagine we're looking bird's eye view on a hula hooper at the center of that clock. The hula hooper, right now we're living in the hula hoop. So the hula hoop doesn't change, but where the hula hoop is in relation to the North Pole may change cyclically. Like you get a little bit, you know, the lamps, the heat lamp, so to speak, would be a little bit closer to, you know, out to the east, and maybe there's a little extra lands over there by Antarctica that thaw out over, but I don't think the North Pole ever shifts. So
No.
I'm open to like different passages opening up from different, heat, proximity to the sun, whatever. But I hope you guys can understand the hula hoop comparison to people out there.
That's great.
Looking at this Prague clock, think about how the whole clock isn't moving. The center is always going to stay the same, but that astrological wheel in the middle is going to hula hoop around that central axis, and that could be what you're seeing with the Earth. I know the moon people say, the reflection moon theory, they say, well, there's other lands and those aren't thought out right now. Like I said, not my expertise. But Shane, what do you think about, Professor Longo, crater theory?
I'm gonna say, on a list of things on cosmological ideas about what the Earth is, that's probably last on the list. We're in a crater, so any reflections in craters, and it's probably not that. But we do appreciate the $5. But I would probably forget about the crater for reflection.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you know what he's talking about? Like, there's a theory that the moon has essentially like the flat Earth map on it, largely, right, except that there's a few extra land masses, but it's pretty on the money with the moon reflecting the UN logo, north, nordocentric kind of whatever that projection is. So the crater theory, yes, we are not, I reject it. I think we all do. Any notions of like a concave Earth, right? Mm-hmm. Concave Earth, I think, is nonsense. You don't get. Sorry, goddamn teenagers.
Moto, take your concave and get out of here.
So concave Earth, I think, is nonsense. But moon reflection theory, Professor Longo, if you don't know much about that,
no,
I think there's a little to it, and it doesn't hinge on a crater shape. The theory with the moon reflection does not hinge on a crater shaped anything.
Okay.
Not at all.
Could be wrong. Doesn't sound that appealing to me, but could be completely wrong. I'm no expert. Again, on a list of like things I'm interested in, that even like Earth, that stuff is that macro is like number 20 on my list. I try to stay. I'm a Pisces, so I have to stay somewhat grounded. If I start floating around at, a zoomed out vision of the Earth, I just might not come back.
Professor, what's your birthday?
March 16th.
Oh, I'm the 6th.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
My Scorpio, Dr. Longo, even though he thinks he's a Sag.
Yeah. I'm a Sag. The hell are you talking about?
Strong Scorpio, always looking at the occult. God, just in there.
Well, I'm right on the cusp. So Sag, 100% with Scorpio flavor. Well, I don't know. I'm Scorpionic, but I'm definitely a Sagittarius. Astrologically, behaviorally.
All right, boys, I got to head out of here in a little bit. But it was very nice chatting with you.
Yeah, man. I look forward to. I want you on. I got to definitely pick your brain about the Rosicrucians.
Oh yeah. We can get into Steiner and Rosicrucians and all that stuff. That's higher up on my list. Crater Earth is a little low, but yeah. All right, I'm gonna head out. Thank you guys.
Awesome.
Bye, Professor Longo. Peace out.
Peace.
Thanks for joining us. Jesus, Andrew. Chased him away with that Crater Earth nonsense. Man,
That's funny.
thank you for the $5, Andrew. So we'll go for like another 19 minutes if you got that in the tank. Cool.
Sure. No problem.
Nice. So what's new? What can people, expect from you? What are you getting into?
Oh,
nowadays?
this will drive you absolutely nuts, Longo. I am exploring a calendar that is based on sunlight hours. And so the way the calendar works is that there's essentially 5 seasons, not 4. Within those 5 seasons, you have 2 36-day periods with a day in the middle. So each season is 73 days. So the notion is that summer is the apex season because there's the most sunlight in it. Then you have fall and spring on either side of that has the same. Fall and spring have the same amount of sunlight. And then you have winter and autumn and spring. They both have the same amount of sunlight in them. And then you have winter and fall that have the same amount of sunlight. And so it's a calendric system where you use sunlight hours to actually determine where you are in the calendar. And it's got me like really tripping because the domes I build are based on a pentagon. It's like a pentagonal shape. It's the Japanese star dome is essentially when you overlay all your struts on the ground into a mandala that's based on a pentagon. When you pop it up into 3 dimensions, you have your dome. And I noticed when I started building them that they were like a sundial. And now it's crazy to find a calendar that actually fits that sundial. Like there's a calendar that's actually based on sunlight that's essentially off this pentagrammal view. And then getting back to like Schauburger and what we were just talking about, all the hermeticists are absolutely obsessed with the pentagon and the pentagram because of the phi ratio and what that means and how that encodes all of the incommensurate geometries for all this different energy. Yeah, you can see those are animations of the stardom, of the geometry. So I'm just like, I cannot wait to get into this calendar and like really suss it out and live it and check into it and see if it's viable or not. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted. You can correct me if I'm wrong, you can still get a pretty dome-shaped thing using hexagons too, right?
Yeah.
It's still a dome?
You can. This is considered a higher frequency. The mathematician that came up with it, he tried everything. He tried quadrants, then he tried the pentagon, then he tried the whatever you call the 7-sided hexagon. I don't know what it'd be called, octagon.
Mm-hmm.
He tried all the different ones, and the one that had the most pleasing and the strongest, I guess you would say, tension in it was the pentagon.
Sure,
yeah. And I love it because I was naturally drawn to that because of all the stuff I had read from the hermeticists like Schauburger. I've had the pentagon on the brain for a long time.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Would it benefit one to wear a pentagonal yarmulke instead of a hexagonal yarmulke?
Yes. You'd be more human. You'd be more human, though.
And that's not the goal.
That's not the goal, exactly.
Right.
You'd be much more human. Because 5 also encodes Venus, right? So the Venusian, the aesthetic, the Aphroditic, like love, like the actual sensual Taurian energy, like
Mhm.
all of that energy would come into the body. And if you notice, like the small hats that have the more hexagonal, they're more insectoid like. They're very like analytical. They're not really in their bodies. If you
Mhm.
start putting things that are 5 around you, it's you're just going to be more human. You're going to be more Taurian. You're going to be like Zorba the Greek. You're going to be in your body more.
So you guys heard it here. If you're looking to cure whatever, if you're looking to cure New Yorkerism, if you're to cure New Yorkerism, wear a 5-tipped pentagonal yarmulke, and
That's right.
you will be cured. Real quick, for those that don't know, those that haven't seen it, the yarmulke comes about due to, as a practice. Sorry, my cats are going crazy. Saturn's North Pole, the North Pole of Saturn. Even though this is CGI, bear with me here. They tell us, they show us that Saturn has a North Pole with a hexagon on top of it. And this is the yarmulke of that planet. Now, you can debate, oh, they show us this, they show us that. Regardless, the Jupiter has the red dot, the storm. It's the storm god. So they're these are breadcrumbs. Bear with me. We're not saying, oh, solar system nonsense. Breadcrumbs. They show us a yarmulke on top of Saturn. Saturn, right?
Lord of the Rings.
Santa always comes down the chimney at the top, right?
Mhm.
Santa is Saturn, is Satan, is Set, is Joseph. Have you noticed any pentagonal stuff with any of the planets?
Other than Venus's, I think Venus, there's a 3-year cycle in which Venus makes the perfect rose, the 5-pointed rose.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the only pentagon or like 5-pointed astronomical thing that I'm aware of. Are there others?
Ooh, the 5 petals of Venus and its 8-year cycle.
It's an 8-year. That's right. And then when you do 5 into 8, when you start doing the math on that, you get the 3.1415.
Mm-hmm.
There's some really cool stuff with that. The ratio of 5 to 8, like it's endless.
Now, what do you think of when you hear words like repent or serpent? To me, I've always linked serpent with 7. That's sept. Serpent, you could say that it's 2 plus 5, the pent. But to repent, that's a very Christian, concept, repent. And then the serpent as well. What do those words, make you think of?
The pentagram? Like, is that what you're alluding to? Like, is there another aspect to it?
Well, just Venus and,
Yes.
forgiveness or self-reflection, temptation. Venus rules temptation. So the 5 being in the serpent, which I usually link to Libra, but Venus rules Libra. So 7th sign of the zodiac, but ruled by Venus. It's all the same.
God, I would never associate. Libra is so airy and it's so into balance that doesn't vibe like just in the way I feel people that have Venusian energy. They don't.
Well, remember,
they don't feel like Libra.
Remember, Libra is ruled overtly, topically by Venus, but Saturn exalts. So you get this conflict, that's why it's the sign of temptation. That's why it's the sign of sin, because it's Venus, all the seductive, fertile potential, and then Saturn and the loss of light in fall.
Right.
You have the squandering in many, how many plants around the world still to this day, you know how you can disprove evolution, okay? Many plants around the world think that a second spring is coming every single fall. There's plenty of plants, fruits, trees who have a false fruiting.
That's true.
Around fall. How have plants through millions of years not realized in all their wisdom that fall comes every year and they get duped into thinking it's a second spring? So how does that happen? Blah, blah, blah. Back to Libra. Libra is Venus and Saturn forced to occupy the same zodiac sign. That's conflict. That's the worst double dose. They have nothing in common. So this is why it's the halfway point. It's the fall of the day. It's the fall of the year. It's the fallen angels and man's fall from grace, the original sin. Yes, you have the sine wave, Libra being the halfway point through that sine wave. The seventh sign is the serpent. And I see this as Libra is the viper and the dove. So here you have Aleister Crowley was a Libra, has one of the most famous librarian quotes ever, Libran quotes. There is love and there is love. There is the serpent and there is the dove. He's talking about Libra, and he's all about love, love, love. But his love is not your smooch, smooch love, right? The love is the law. Libra rules law and love. Love, Venus, and law, Saturn in Libra. And so Libra is a Venusian sign, but it's not considered that fertile. If you check your farmer's almanac or your, astrological planting calendar, Libra is a, neutral at best fertility sign. And that's due to that Saturnian influence. And it's the constriction of Saturn, which is the viper. And then it's the, peace and the love and the making amends and being equal, the impartial judge. That's Venus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So blind, justice too. Blah, blah, blah. Okay.
That's awesome. Thank you for that explanation. Because when I massage Libra people, what comes through to me the most is the coolness of the air element.
Mm-hmm.
And I never associate that with Venus. I always get like a warm, wet feeling from Venus. I don't get the Vata dosha from the Venus energy. So that would make sense. You've just explained a lot to me with why I would be experiencing that with Saturn coming in there and mucking things up.
Yeah, there's a sterility and a rigidity to Libra. Yeah. This is why they rule like edifices, and they're beauty, but they're also architecture. You get what I mean? Like Taurus is all Venus, unbridled growth, warmth, humidity. Libra is the opposite end of that a little bit. It's still beauty and aesthetic. Supremely, it rules aesthetic, Libra does. But it's laws of aesthetic. It's this more orderly, fashion, architecture, jewelry making, you could also say. Libra rules books, books. That's a huge one. Black on white. Black symbols on white paper. That's a Saturnian concept right there. To quantify or to arrange thoughts into a gridded, pages, organized thoughts, very Saturnian. But you have this being ruled by Libra, which is supposed to be like this libertine. That's where we get the word libertine, liberal, the permissive, kind of unjudging, non-judgmental, but at the same time, they're the judge of judges. They're Saturn. They're the Punisher. Here's some good ones. Libra rules law enforcement too. This is why, hey, the cops are here. Hey, copper, catch me if you can, copper. Right? And it's the fuzz. Libra rules the fuzz. That's Venus. That's the, oh my God, so seductive. You ever, the fuzz on a fruit, on a kiwi,
Yeah.
or, soft
Yeah.
skin, seduction. And that's the fuzz, copper. Shit, there's a phrase that sums up the Libra Scorpio.
What's the
Shit, whatever.
what's the Columbia archetype?
Like the goddess?
Like Lady Justice in Columbia.
Yeah. Well, right there you have loom, luminance. That's Lucifer. So Lucifer is Libra. Lucifer's, people say, oh, Lucifer's Venus. Yes, but because Venus rules, people always say, why is Lucifer and Saturn, are they the same thing? The Bible never says they're the same thing. But in Libra, you have Lucifer, Venus, and Saturn. So you have Venus taking on this Saturnian darker role. Forgive me, what did you say? I got lost.
I brought up Columbia, but I want to give a personal anecdote, and you might have a real insight to it. I always notice Venus during Libra season has a terrible feeling in my body. And you just, the way your explanation of it just made so much sense because of the exaltation that's occurring from Saturn at that time. Because the way my body registers it whenever I see it, in fall, is like I end up going through dread.
Mm-hmm. You have a lot. Yeah. You also get a lot of red Octobers, a lot of massacres, financial, mishaps, catastrophes happen in October. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like there's a bit of...
No, it's on a personal level because I watch the sky. So when I'm seeing, like this last year in 2023, in early October, when I was observing Lucifer in the morning, Venus, it was like this piercing light. And I just it just made me feel horrible. And then like one morning, it like actually woke me up. It was like the light of Venus was like piercing. It was crazy. And I was like, what is that? It was like, why is like Venus like so crazy bright in the morning? And when I like do an audit of the thoughts that I was having, they were very Saturnian, like Reaper like thoughts that were coming through me. And that's making me think of this, Venus Saturn, thing that goes on during Libra that you brought up. Like that's what it's having me reflect on.
Yeah. The Columbia luminescence in Columbia is the same as Lucifer, or Li. Li means light, liberty, Lady Liberty, Lady Justice, and Columbia, largely are the same deity, the same, pointing to the same planet, if not zodiac sign of Libra. Li, light, Luz, Lucifer, light, and then Columbia. Lum means light as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's awesome.
Yep. So anything else you want to bring up?
No, that's really it. I'm really excited to get into that. And then just like I was saying when we started, I got all the goodies starting with my dome building here in Missouri. So I'm actually gonna be down in Florida in like a little less than 3 weeks. I'm flying to Mexico and I'm gonna go see my family. So I'll be down in your hood.
make sure you say hi.
Yeah, man. I
Come on
definitely
in.
will. I need to swing by and see your digs.
Yeah, we can maybe do a live in-person show too if you're interested.
Yeah, I am. That'd be awesome.
Sweet. So, what are we looking at here?
Domes.
Yeah.
Look at that. That's beautiful.
So, guys, Jimmy, if you could pull up his website one more time or his YouTube channel, either. Guys, go check out Toph, the man, right? The gardener of Eden. And he is BioCharisma on YouTube. Is your title BioCharisma Podcast or just BioCharisma?
I believe on YouTube it's BioCharisma. On Instagram it's BioCharisma. Telegram it's BioCharisma.
Mm-hmm.
The podcast is called the BioCharisma Podcast.
Okay. So
Yeah.
check out his website. Check out his Instagram, his YouTube. Find him wherever you go. And, you know, a lot of the Bears, a lot of the Owen Benjamin crowd probably knows who you are. If you don't, make sure to stay tuned to his work. Very interesting stuff. And we're hoping, okay, give us a couple of years here. We're going to be making millions of bucks, right? Hopefully we can get Topher to come design our next Fourth Reich Floridian Empire. He'll be the city planner for the Kingdom of Atlantis, we'll just say.
That'd be awesome. I'm into it.
Head architect of New Atlantis. So
I'll take the gig.
Shall ya? Crazy not to. So go check him out, guys. Give him a thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for whatever him and my brother have, you know, down the line coming up. You can look forward to that. So Professor Longo too, you can find him here on the Dr. Longo Old World Florida channel. You can find him at Dancing Elephant on Instagram. The dancing_elephant on Instagram. But thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Thanks to Jimmy, my man behind the scenes, helping us with production and visuals and stuff. And my cat's making all the noise in the back. But thanks to everyone out there, the familiar faces, big channels in the room tonight, some heavy hitters. Thank y'all. All right, Topher, you want to say goodbye to the peeps?
Thank you all for coming out, and Longo, as usual, I love rapping out with you. It's good to see you.
Sure, yeah. We'll do it again soon, and everyone have a good night. Peace.